It's been a month since the Canadian Food Inspection Agency senselessly slaughtered over 300 healthy ostriches on a rural farm in Edgewood, British Columbia, because they caught the avian flu a year prior. And now, thanks to a formal request for information made by a Conservative MP, we're finally getting a glimpse into how costly the CFIA's Kill to Control mission was for taxpayers. I'm Drea Humphrey with Rebel News, and today you'll learn how the CFIA and the RCMP spent close to $900,000 of what I believe is millions of tax dollars to kill those ostriches. Before I dive into the tax dollars spent by the CFIA to go to war with the ostrich farmers in pursuit of wiping out their healthy flock, their livelihoods, and thus the promising antibody research their herd was involved in, I thought many of you would like a little bit of an update on how the farmers are doing. Spoiler alert, not good. And yes, of course, they're fighters who are doing their best to turn their pain into action, and I believe they will be successful at doing so. But for now, trying to integrate back into life after fighting so hard for almost a year to simply have their birds tested instead of slaughtering, like we saw take place November 6th and 7th, it's not that easy to do. They have empty hearts, it seems, empty pens, and you can see Katie Pasitny on her Facebook giving updates on what that's like. But let's show a moment of who we don't see quite as often. That's co-owner of the farm, Dave Belinsky, as he tried to escape the sadness.
I'm trying to get over it, not get over it, but to get myself pulled back together. And I will succeed. Lorraine and I have taken a few days to visit with family. So visiting with family and trying to explain to
Hey baby, Dad, you're okay. Take a deep breath, Dad. Deep breath.
Yet our so-called leader, Prime Minister Mark Carney, when he thinks of the injustice of what happened to the animals and farmers, well, to him, it's all just a joke.
There have been a few surprises during my first months as Prime Minister. For example, I hadn't expected to spend so much time dealing with wildlife. Belugas, ostriches, premiers.
Mark Carney didn't deal with those ostriches. Well, actually, I guess since they're dead for no reason, he kind of did. And under his ministers of health and agriculture, he sure spent a lot of money dealing with those ostriches, didn't he? Lengthy court battles instead of testing the recovered flock, just a couple of them to prove their health, seizing the farmers and their neighbors' land and property, spying on them, ordering the RCMP to arrest some of them, pen hunting the birds to death in the middle of the night in a fashion that even culling experts say is inhumane. Police and CFIA officials around the clock, that's gotta add up, right? Especially when in operating physically on the farm for nearly 50 days.
This Liberal government has failed to do its job by letting the Canadian Food Inspection Agency order the slaughter of a herd of ostriches with no transparency or communication to farmers or Canadians. Since the beginning, and apparently unlike the CFIA, I've actually met with the farmers and raised their concerns publicly. These farmers love their animals. Senior academics are begging for access to potential research on diseases. Canadians are traveling from all over across the country in outrage. This communication fiasco has been allowed to escalate into a crisis, and now tens of thousands of Canadians have raised their voices on the issue, wanting to know why. Why isn't a Liberal Agriculture Minister forcing the CFIA to properly retest these 400 ostriches? Why would the Liberal Health Minister want to throw away valuable potential medical research? The nation is watching and Canadians demand answers. Why won't you explain yourselves?
Just remind the member that it's through the chair. I don't know that much about ostriches.
Thanks to Conservative MP Scott Anderson, who fought politically to try and save the flock when they were alive and is still seeking transparency now, we have more answers. In his order paper in question, he asked precisely what the full extent of the taxpayer dollars were spent on the ostrich farm file. Now, what we do know is the CFIA and the RCMP spent a combined $898,000 of what I'm guessing is more accurately millions of taxpayer dollars. But nevertheless, we have a glimpse into some of what they spent on this chart. I'll put the full thing in our written article for this report in this description box below. Now, over 72,000 of that was for porta potties. Look at that. That's some expensive poop, don't you think, that we all paid for, considering the CFIA, again, spent nearly 50 days there, and the RCMP, when they could have just pooped at home. Same with the RCMP. Well, actually, the RCMP could have been cracking down on extortion cases in Surrey or fentanyl labs. Lord knows British Columbia has enough of those. And the reason why they should have been home is because they knew very well the farmers were going to try to take their fight to the Supreme Court, as is their constitutional right to do so. But they still tried to race them and came to the property with all of these resources. And then when the court said, we'll take time to consider it, they stayed there knowing the judge could take months to decide. And the judge did take a couple of months. It ended up being a no. So yes, they were there and they were ready. But why should we have had to pay for that time for them to just sit there and torment those farmers and arguably those animals? There are some things to be expected, like $9,000 for feed, of course, and basically between both the CFIA and the RCMP, they've paid just under $900,000. But some things are more vague on the list. Like if you look down on this chart where it's more itemized, it says there are specialized equipment for $32,000. Of course, it's not really telling us what that type of equipment was, maybe to go ahead and jam our cell phones. And look at here, almost $100,000 on office, then some professional services without telling us exactly what that is. They do say they have $100,000 on security, and that's not for on the farm, that's for 3 offices. So they were having security at these offices. Now, I was on the farm. I saw the CFIA. Nobody was trying to hurt them there. That's all I can say. I did attend some protests at the CFIA building. Nobody was being aggressive or trying to hurt them. I do know that after they did go ahead and slaughter these birds for no reason, this office in Kelowna was defaced with feces and eggs, which of course should be taken seriously. So I don't know if there was some real threats online or something like that that made them feel like they had to do that. But nevertheless, the RCMP was at the farm physically, remember, in full force. I would estimate around 50 officers to 80 officers every single day. If you talk about the road checks, if you talk about who is closer to the CFIA officials, if you talk about those on rotation for shift change and who was down the street at the command center and all of those things, it adds up. And yet, where was the protection for the one that seemed to have needed it the most? Spirit. Some of you remember that is the hen who was injured after the CFIA and the RCMP descended onto the property like they were some sort of predators, which I guess in some way they were to the animals, and the animals were running around thinking they were prey, going to get hurt. Well, this hen in particular was re-injured, and then leaked footage came out that strongly supported what the farmers were saying, which was that that bird was being neglected and not taken care of in order to be saved. That leak footage was heartbreaking. I was enraged. Many of you were enraged. Where was the RCMP investigation to that? Spirit, of course, died, weeks before the rest of her family and friends because she died of what looks like neglect. The RCMP also didn't seem to care too much that the CFIA was tampering with the farm's cameras to try and shut me out from knowing what they were doing. Our very own Ezra Levant asked one of the RCMPs, are you going to invest that? That seems like mischief at the very least. Not interested. So it seems that the RCMP were there to serve and protect the CFIA in many ways, including carrying out their orders, that's right, the bureaucratic agency's orders, to arrest 2 of the farmers. Yet the only thing that looks remotely close to being about salaries between the RCMP is this measly little $17,000 we see here for personnel. Yeah, I'm not buying it. Liberals being liberals, liberal-run agencies, I should say, being liberal-run agencies. Both the CFIA and the federal RCMP are claiming, they just really haven't had time to look at the wages. So we don't know right now what the overtime and the wages would be. But again, I guess it's millions. Lies by omission. And that's why I'll keep digging. Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. At Rebel News, we continuously bring you the other side of the story, and we are going to do that in a big way with what took place at Universal Ostrich Farms on November 6th and 7th. We are investigating that massacre and the entire culling industry, but we can't do any of that without you. Learn more about this investigative film and how you can be a part of making it possible at ostrichfarmdocumentary.com.